I lived in a small town in Ontario. There are a lot of small towns in my area. However, this town is definitely one of the quietest ones. It was supposed to be a pretty nice and safe place to be, but unfortunately, it was due to the high crime in the area what makes it not so good to stay. There are a lot of the things that do happen, and the sirens would often be heard a few times a week. It's just really insane. But however, though, this just happened to me recently, and it was just only a few months ago. It's one of the freakiest and scariest incidents that happened to me. Long story short, it was just around after 4 a.m. I was asleep at the time, and my mom was up watching TV, and my brother was playing it on his laptop in his room. Why my dad isn't in this picture is another story, but my mom told my dad the next day, so he was freaked out as my mom was along with myself. At the time, my brother was doing something when my mom heard loud banging coming from the front door. At first, my mom thought that it was my brother getting upset over a game, but they became frantic, and that was when she told my brother to answer the door. Thinking it was an emergency, my mom told my brother to open the front door. My brother headed downstairs and got to the front door to open it, with my mom following him. As soon as my brother answered the door, this guy bolts right in, and the first thing he did was grab the frying pan. This man was mentally crazy insane, and he starts yelling and screaming, to which it alerted my mom. My mom came downstairs to try to calm the man down, but he continued yelling as if he was a mental patient. He started saying stuff like, "There's a bear, they set me up, they're going to frame me," etc. And even started saying stuff about his mother being involved. That was when he said we need a knife. My brother was squished by this man, and the my mom told the man just to let go of my brother, and he did so. My brother runs upstairs to get the phone and call 911. While standing on the top of the stairs, as she waits and sees the chaos unfold, my mom, with the frying pan in hands, was ready to strike, like if he were to attack her. However, my mom started to fight with him while he was trying to find a knife from the rack where all the dishes were, flying everywhere, and he managed to get a knife, and my mom stopped fighting as this man runs around the living room with the knife in hand. However, she does try to calm the man down while my brother was on the phone with 911 and explained to the officer what was going on. My mom shouted the address while the phone was on speaker so the 911 operator can hear that they needed the cops. The man sat on the couch with a knife in hand while my mom explained to him that help is on the way. This man's eyes looked like he had mental health issues, but he also looked like he was on drugs. As soon as the cops show up, the man runs towards the front door with the kitchen knife in hand. My mom yells to the cop saying, "He's got a knife!" As soon as she says that, the cop tases the man, to which it didn't affect him. However, the cops handcuffed him and managed to put him in the back of the police car. He was taken to the hospital while a cop came to the house to take our statement. I woke up to the commotion, and my mom and my brother explained what had happened. The cop took our statement, and they also found the knife that the man dropped on our front lawn. So the cops took it for evidence and left just around after 5 a.m. This was so freaky, and that I'm surprised I slept through the whole incident. But I'd say this is the most scariest night I've ever had. I hope the man that was mentally insane is getting the help that he needs. I don't know what would have happened to my brother and my mom if the cops hadn't shown up. This is what scares me the most, and I will remember this night to this day. A friend of mine used to live in a small town. It was a very nice area, but she had moved to the city because of some reasons that I won't go into. But if I had to say one thing that really terrified her, it was definitely one story that really was messed up. To make a long story short, my friend's name was Jasmine, and she really loved the small town where she was at. It was not far from Thunder Bay, and at the time of the story, this took place in 2017. Jasmine was living with her parents at the time, and her older brother was in college. She was pretty much done with college. However, it was just her brother was still in college, getting another degree in something, probably engineering stuff. At the time of the story, Jasmine was maybe around 22 years old, and she never really had anything scary or anything happen to her until this night. She pretty much was just chilling around, and she got a text from someone that she didn't even know. At first she thought that it could have been one of her friends of her friends and numbers, but she asked who it was. This guy introduced himself as Kevin, and he seemed to be alright. Jasmine started talking with him, and they started talking about some stuff, but eventually Jasmine was getting a weird feeling that something wasn't quite right about him. At first she didn't know what it was at the time, so she just played along and started talking to him. She started messaging Kevin and asking what his interests were and stuff, and they started talking. Eventually, it wasn't until Kevin asks if he can have her social media, to which she said of course, and he gave him her Instagram as well as Snapchat. At the time, she was pretty much just doing her own thing while she was in the town, basically doing what she likes to do. However, it wasn't until maybe a few days later when Jasmine was on her way home from work. As she was on her way home from work, she felt as if she was being followed. Now, she only lived a few blocks from town, so she was feeling like she was being watched. She didn't think much of it and continued to walk down the street, not even paying any attention to her surroundings. She ended up looking behind her a few times, feeling a little uncomfortable about the situation, feeling that someone was following her. But she didn't see anyone no matter when she turned her back, so she ended up continuing to walk down the street. As she was continuing down towards her street, she ended up turning around to see if that man was following her or whoever it was, but there was no one there. She was confused, but she thought that maybe it was her imagination, so she continued on her way. As she was continuing on her way, she ended up hearing what sounded like fast footsteps. She turned around quickly to see absolutely no one there, so she ended up running all the way back home. By the time she got back home, her dad was outside having a smoke when she ends up saying that there was someone following her. Of course, they filed a police report, and the police were doing patrols of the area and a couple drive-bys just to make sure that this person was not following Jasmine to her house. Fast forward to about maybe a week later, and that's when Kevin comes back with, "I'm at your house." He sent a picture to Jasmine on Snapchat, and that's when Jasmine's blood ran cold. He was standing in front of the door, saying and cursing to her to let him in. Mind you, this was around maybe midnight, and she obviously got scared. She told her she was alone and wasn't sure what to do, so she ended up calling 911. She locked herself in the bathroom with the window, thankfully, just in case if he were to try to get in. However, she could hear bangs coming from the door, and she was praying to God that the door holds out. As her store door was made of steel, thankfully, she ended up crying a bit on the phone with the 911 operator as they tried to tell her that it was okay and that help was on the way. It wasn't until maybe 2 minutes later when the sound of sirens were music to her ears. She ended up looking over to see the policemen arrived, and they arrest the man who apparently tried to get away, but he was tased and he was put under handcuffs. The police officer told her that she could come on out, and she ended up coming out of the bathroom and coming downstairs. Once she got downstairs, the cops even asked her a few questions like, does she know this person, and stuff like that. She ended up telling him that She got a call from an unknown number, well, a text, but a call as well, and it turns out it was actually Kevin. Apparently, Kevin had somehow got her a hold of her number, and he had been using this to stalk women. He also had violated a few men in the town, and he was arrested soon after. What could have happened to Jasmine if she had not called the police? At least I don't even want to know. Her parents were called by the police, Lisa, shortly after the man and was forced in the back of the police car. And of course, her parents were now always be on the lookout for Jasmine. Jasmine never walked anywhere alone in the dark or anywhere again, with the exception of if she was with someone. She's got 2 kids now, and they will never go, and she's going to make sure they never go through anything like what she just did. This took place in the US when one of my friends was going down to the US for a convention. I don't remember what convention it was, but it had something to do with some cartoon characters from movies and shows. My friend at the time of the story, we'll call him Wesley. Wesley was driving through the US, which I can't remember where it was, but as he was in the USA, he ended up coming across what appeared to be driving through a small town. What was strange about the small town was that it was deserted and there was no one in there. He wasn't so sure as to what it was, but he ended up getting a bad feeling that something was terribly wrong with the small town. He ended up pulling over and ended up taking a look around the town, looking through windows of the old buildings, only seeing some debris as well as some stuff inside. It was basically stuff that were pretty much just were done and over with when it came to this kind of stuff, and he wasn't so sure as to if someone was really there. He ended up looking around some more, wanting to explore the small town a little bit. He wasn't so sure as to when it was abandoned and when did people stop coming through here. He ended up looking around, but there was no one in sight. That's when he ended up looking over to see there was an abandoned school. It was a schoolhouse, and it looked like it had been built in the early 18th century. That's when he ended up going up to it and ended up looking inside. As he looked inside, he noticed the door was unlocked, so he decided to walk in and have a look around. As he walked inside, he ended up looking around, but couldn't see anyone there. But he could see some old school supplies and even some notebooks that hadn't been used in years. This was definitely a small town that had once been filled with people, had since been abandoned. He ended up looking around inside, and he ended up seeing that there was a patch of blood on the ground. He was confused as to why would there be a patch of blood on the ground. He ended up following what seemed to be a trail. He ends up walking around and following the trail path of blood when he ended up smelling what smelled awful. It smelled like rotting flesh, and when he turned the corner to go up the schoolhouse, he see in the bell tower there was a rotting corpse of a young woman, and it looked like she had been dead for at most a day or 2. That's when Wesley ends up getting out of the schoolhouse and ends up going back to his car. Once he got back in his car, he drove off until he got to another town that had civilians there. He never told his parents or anybody about this incident, as he was afraid that no one would believe on what he saw. How did that girl ended up meeting her fate was one thing, but Wesley knows for sure that he won't be visiting that town again.